The corridors of the Heliox Tower gleamed with polished alloy, a monument to wealth and influence in the center of the alien metropolis. Among the sweeping glass arches and silver-lined walls, only one figure seemed out of place. Darren Cole, human janitor, pushed his mop along the floor as if he were invisible. To most in the tower, he was just that, a background worker in a world dominated by blue-skinned Tyverans. Darren liked it that way. Being overlooked meant he could see things others missed. While executives argued, while security barked orders, while staff rushed past, Darren was quietly watching. He had spent years working menial jobs in alien corporations after humanity's integration into the galactic economy. And if there was one lesson he had learned, it was this: arrogance blinds the powerful. The Tyverans were the pinnacle of that arrogance. Their empire spanned 3 sectors. Their technology was generations ahead of humanity's, and their wealth was beyond calculation. And yet, despite all that, Darren noticed something today that made his pulse quicken. He paused mid-sweep as he caught sight of a deal unfolding in one of the tower's glass-walled chambers. Inside, 2 Tyveran officials leaned over a polished obsidian table, while a human intermediary nodded eagerly. Across from them sat a figure of extraordinary presence, Lady Valeth, the billionaire industrialist whose decisions rippled through economies like earthquakes. She was flanked by armored guards, their cerulean skin a testament to Tyveran might. Papers were being pushed across the table. Darren felt his throat tighten. Contracts. He knew enough to recognize the symbols etched in the Tyveran script. They weren't standard business terms. They were binding oaths, the kind that enslaved entire industries and shattered those who dared break them. Something about the symbols hummed wrong in his mind, like a crooked picture frame he couldn't ignore. He edged closer, careful not to draw attention. The guards were focused inward, all eyes on their mistress. Darren angled his mop as a cover, his gaze flicking over the glyphs again. He couldn't read all of it, but he caught the phrase eternal servitude, woven in delicate spirals of ink. His breath caught. This wasn't a merger. It was a trap. The human intermediary's hand shook as he pointed at a line. "My lady, with this signature, your dominion over the sector will be absolute." His tone was oily, too eager. Darren had seen that look before. The look of someone selling out for quick gain. Lady Valeth's crystalline eyes narrowed. Her pen hovered above the paper. "A single stroke," she murmured. Her voice was smooth, practiced, a melody of command. She was seconds from signing. Darren's instincts screamed at him. He thought of walking away, of letting the powerful destroy themselves. What did he care if an alien billionaire chained herself to a cursed contract? But then he thought of the workers, the smaller colonies, the human employees who would be crushed in the fallout. This wasn't just a trap for her. It was a snare that would bleed thousands dry. His mop clattered to the ground as he rushed forward. The sound echoed louder than it should have, bouncing off the walls. The guards snapped their heads toward him, hands on their stun batons. Darren raised his palms, heart pounding, but he forced his voice out. "Don't sign that contract." The words tore from him with more force than he expected. For a split second, silence hung in the chamber. Everyone froze, the guards, the intermediary, the towering billionaire herself. Her pen stopped midair, a droplet of ink trembling at its tip. Lady Valeth's gaze cut into him like a blade. "A janitor?" she said coldly. Her tone wasn't anger yet, it was confusion. "You dare interrupt this transaction?" The intermediary snarled, already trying to cover.
"Ignore him, my lady."
"He's nothing. Just a human mop sweeper. They don't even understand our contracts." Darren's chest heaved. Every instinct told him to back down, to apologize, to beg for mercy. But he had seen enough predatory deals in his life, enough signatures that destroyed people who didn't read the fine print. And he knew that this was worse than any of them. "I might just be a janitor," Darren said, his voice trembling but steady. "But I know a trap when I see one. That contract isn't power. It's chains. You sign that and you don't own anything anymore. You become owned." One of the guards stepped forward, hand clamping on Darren's shoulder with crushing force. Pain jolted through him, but he didn't look away from Valeth. Her eyes narrowed further, her hand lowering the pen slowly. The intermediary's face paled. He started speaking faster, desperate. "My lady, he's lying. Humans don't even—" "Silence," Valeth snapped, her voice a whip-crack. The room stiffened. Even the guard hesitated, though his grip on Darren's arm remained iron-tight. For a moment her expression softened, not into kindness, but into calculation. Her pen tapped against the paper, leaving small ink dots like stuttering heartbeats. "Explain," she said finally, eyes boring into Darren. "Why should I believe you?" Sweat slicked Darren's palms. His mind raced. He had no proof, no documents, no authority, just a gut feeling honed from years of cleaning up after the powerful. He swallowed hard. "Because predators always disguise their cages as gifts," he said. "And because he jerked his chin at the human intermediary, is smiling too much." The intermediary's grin faltered. It was just enough. Valeth's eyes flicked toward him, seeing now what Darren had seen all along, the nervous twitch in his hand, the way his voice had been too eager, the glint of greed over loyalty. The billionaire leaned back in her chair, pen lowering to the desk. The droplet of ink finally fell, leaving a tiny black spot on the edge of the paper. She studied Darren with a cold, unreadable expression. The silence stretched until it hurt. Darren braced himself, ready to be dragged out, beaten, maybe even executed for daring to speak. But then, against every expectation, Valeth set the pen down. Her words were ice and steel. "Contract cancelled," the intermediary gasped, his face blanching. "My lady, you can't—" "I said cancelled," she cut him off, her voice leaving no room for argument. She slid the papers away, her piercing eyes never leaving Darren's. "And you, human janitor, you've just bought yourself both my attention and my suspicion." The guard's grip tightened once more before slowly releasing. Darren's knees wobbled, relief crashing through him like a wave. But he also knew something terrifying. He hadn't just saved Valeth. He had made himself a target. The next morning, Darren sat in the service hall below Heliox Tower, staring at the untouched plate of synth bread on the table in front of him. His hands trembled as he replayed the events of yesterday over and over in his mind. He had shouted down one of the most powerful deals in the galaxy, spoken directly to Lady Valeth, and somehow walked out alive. That should have been impossible. Yet here he was, alive, but with his stomach twisted into knots. He knew something had changed. The guards who normally ignored him now eyed him in passing, their gazes sharp and assessing instead of dismissive. Other staff whispered behind his back, a mixture of awe and fear. A janitor wasn't supposed to be seen, let alone remembered, but now Darren wasn't invisible anymore. He had broken the unspoken rule of survival in Tyveran society. Don't draw attention to yourself if you're human. As he pushed the food away, the door to the hall hissed open and 2 armored guards entered. Their uniforms gleamed with authority, every step heavy with purpose. Darren's pulse quickened. For an instant he wondered if this was it, if he was about to be hauled away for daring to speak yesterday. He considered running but knew it would be useless. "You. Human," one of them barked, his voice deep as stone grinding against stone. "Lady Valeth summons you now." Darren's throat went dry. He nodded quickly, forcing himself to his feet. His legs felt like lead as the guards escorted him out of the hall and into the high-speed lift that carried them upward. The ride was silent, the humming of the lift's magnetic coils the only sound. Darren tried to steady his breathing, tried to prepare himself for whatever awaited. He had no illusions. This could end with his blood staining the polished floors of her chamber. When the door slid open, the brightness of the executive level hit him like a physical blow. Sunlight poured through crystalline skylights, catching on marble walls that shimmered faintly as if alive. Tyvaran elites moved through the hallways in flowing garments, their heads turning in subtle curiosity as they noticed Darren escorted between guards. He swallowed hard, feeling smaller with every step. The guards led him into a chamber far larger than the negotiation room from yesterday. The air carried a cool, sterile scent, and the sound of water trickled from a fountain carved into the wall. At the far end sat Lady Valeth, poised in a chair of black alloy that seemed to grow from the floor itself. Her piercing eyes fixed on him immediately, her expression calm but unreadable. "Leave us," she said softly, and the 2 guards obeyed without hesitation. The doors sealed shut behind Darren, and silence fell like a heavy cloak. He stood frozen, his palms damp, waiting for her to speak. "You," she began, her voice measured and deliberate, "disrupted a transaction worth trillions. You embarrassed my associates. And yet—" She leaned forward slightly, her fingers lacing together atop the desk. "You may have saved me from ruin. I am not accustomed to such contradictions." Darren forced himself to meet her gaze, though every instinct screamed at him to look away. I only did what I thought was right, he said, his voice tight. The contract was a trap. I couldn't just stand by and let it happen. Valeth tilted her head, studying him as though he were an unfamiliar specimen. A human janitor claims to see what my advisors could not. Do you know how improbable that is? Do you know how dangerous it is for you to be correct? His breath caught. He didn't know if that was an accusation or a strange sort of praise. I wasn't trying to challenge anyone, he said quickly. I just noticed that intermediary, the way he pushed the contract, the words in the script. It was wrong. For the first time, a faint smile touched her lips, cold and calculating. You noticed. Yes, that is the word. The Tyveran mind is trained to see patterns of strength and profit. But humans, perhaps your weakness gives you a different perspective. The overlooked notice details the powerful miss. Her words unsettled him, though he couldn't deny the truth in them. Humans had survived among alien empires not by being stronger, but by seeing cracks others ignored. He shifted uneasily as Valeth rose from her chair and approached him, her movements graceful yet predatory. You intrigue me, Darren Cole, she said, her voice almost a whisper. That is dangerous for both of us. Tell me, why did you really stop me? Not for me. Not for power, why? Darren swallowed, forcing the lump in his throat down. Because I've seen contracts like that before. Not on your scale, but enough to know they destroy lives. I couldn't let that happen again. Not when I could stop it. For a long moment, Valeth said nothing. Then she circled him slowly, her eyes scanning him as if peeling back layers of his soul. He resisted the urge to flinch, standing as still as he could, though sweat traced a path down his back. Compassion, she murmured finally. Such a fragile human thing. It blinds most of your kind. Yet in you it acted as a blade, cutting through deception. How fascinating. He almost laughed at the absurdity. Fascinating was not a word he expected to hear from a billionaire who could have him killed with a gesture. But she sounded sincere, or as close to sincere as someone like her could. She stopped in front of him again, eyes glinting like shards of crystal. Very well. You will not be executed. For now. Her smile widened slightly at his visible relief. But relief is premature. You interfered, and now my enemies will wonder who you are. They will probe. They will pry. Some will want to use you. Others will want to erase you. Darren's stomach churned. He had known deep down that stepping into that room yesterday would cost him. But hearing her lay it out so plainly made his insides twist. What happens to me now? He asked quietly. That, she said, turning back toward her chair, depends on whether you are as useful as you are reckless. She sat down gracefully, her posture once again perfectly controlled. I will test you, Darren Cole. If you succeed, perhaps you will find a place above the floor you once mopped. If you fail, the floor will drink your blood instead. His breath hitched at the bluntness of her words. He had walked into a lion's den, and now she was offering him either elevation or execution. Neither option felt safe, but at least one meant survival. He clenched his fists at his sides, drawing in a steadying breath. What kind of test? Valeth tapped her fingers against the armrest, the faint sound echoing like a countdown. Information. A web of deceit surrounds me, and I need someone the deceivers will underestimate. Someone invisible. That was you, Janitor. Now you must decide whether to remain invisible or become a weapon hidden in plain sight. Darren's pulse hammered. He was a janitor, not a spy, not an operative. But he also knew there was no refusing her. To say no was to die. To say yes was to step into a game far larger and far deadlier than he could imagine. He swallowed, lifting his chin with a resolve he didn't entirely feel. Then I'll do it. Whatever it takes. Valeth's cold smile returned, sharper this time. Good. Then your test begins tonight. Fail and you vanish. Succeed. And perhaps I will call you more than janitor. The words lingered in the chamber as the weight of his new fate pressed down on him. Darren realized with a shiver that yesterday he had only delayed death. Today he had signed his life into a different kind of contract, one he couldn't walk away from. The city beyond Heliox Tower never truly slept. But tonight it felt different to Darren as he walked its neon-lit streets. Tyvaran skyscrapers loomed above like silent sentinels, their crystalline spires glowing faintly in the midnight haze. Streams of alien vehicles hummed through the skyways, casting shifting shadows across the lower levels where humans like him usually stayed. He felt exposed, every flicker of light painting him as a target. Yet he had been given a task, and failure meant death. Valith's instructions had been simple, but the simplicity made them more terrifying. Find proof that her intermediary, Tarlin, was acting as a saboteur for another faction. A name whispered in corridors, a transaction record, anything that revealed betrayal. Darren knew little of Tyveran politics, but he knew greed when he saw it. Tarlin had reeked of it, and if Darren's instincts had been right yesterday, then tonight he had to turn instinct into evidence. He had no tools, no allies, and no protection. The guards who had escorted him to Valith's chamber had not offered guidance afterward. They had simply deposited him back at the service wing with a single warning: do not fail her. That had been hours ago. Now he was alone, clutching his janitor's badge like it might somehow open doors that would otherwise stay sealed. His breath misted in the cool night air, each exhale betraying his nerves. The first place he went was the underlevels beneath the tower, where service workers mingled in dim-lit taverns and forgotten halls. Here, information trickled like water through cracks. Whispers from couriers, rumors from clerks, secrets traded for a drink. Darren kept his head down as he stepped into a tavern where Tyverans rarely visited. The air was thick with smoke and the bitter tang of recycled spirits, the kind that dulled rather than sharpened the senses. At a corner table sat Gesso, a lanky human technician Darren had known in passing. Jesso's hands were stained with circuit grease, his eyes always darting nervously as though hunted by debts. Darren approached cautiously, sliding into the seat opposite him. "I need information," he said in a low voice, trying not to sound desperate. "About Tarlin, the human negotiator." Gesso blinked, his gaze sharpening at the name. "You don't want to be asking about him, Cole. Not unless you've got a death wish." He leaned in closer, lowering his voice further. "Word is Tarlin's tied up with the Xeran Syndicate. The kind who gut planets for profit. He shouldn't even be touching Tyveran contracts, but he's got backing. Strong backing." The name meant little to Darren, but the weight in Gesso's tone told him enough. He frowned. "Then why hasn't anyone exposed him?" Gesso snorted. "Because anyone who tries disappears. Humans vanish quietly. Tyvarans vanish loudly. Either way, no one dares speak louder than a whisper. You'd better walk away, Cole, before you end up one of them." Darren's chest tightened, but he shook his head. "I can't walk away. I need proof. Something undeniable." His voice carried a conviction he didn't entirely feel, but he forced it to sound steady. Gesso studied him for a long moment, then sighed, slumping in his chair. "You're insane. But maybe that's why you'll survive." He scribbled something on a scrap of paper, sliding it across the table. "Tarlin keeps an office near the sky docks, 3rd tier. Always late hours, always guarded. If you're going to find anything, it'll be there. But if he catches you..." He left the sentence unfinished. Darren pocketed the scrap, nodding his thanks. He left the tavern quickly, the eyes of other workers following him with silent pity. His footsteps echoed too loudly in the quiet streets as he made his way toward the sky docks. He tried to steady his breathing, but his pulse raced faster with each step, as though his body knew the danger even before his mind admitted it. The sky docks loomed ahead, an expanse of platforms where sleek alien ships rested under glowing beacons. Cargo haulers trundled between vessels while dockhands in glowing vests shouted orders in half a dozen languages. Above them all, the 3rd-tier offices rose like watchtowers, their windows glowing faintly against the darkness. Darren spotted the one Gesso had marked and swallowed hard. The office was flanked by 2 Tyveran guards, their armor polished and their expressions sharp. Darren stayed in the shadows, considering his approach. He couldn't fight his way in, not with stun batons and alien muscle blocking the way. He needed subtlety, something humans excelled at when survival was on the line. He scanned the dock until his gaze fell on a service vent. It wasn't glamorous, but service tunnels rarely were. He pried the grate open quietly, slipping inside and crawling through the narrow, dust-coated shaft. The air smelled of oil and stale heat, every movement of his body echoing faintly through the metal. He prayed no sensors were hidden in here, but luck for once seemed to favor him. He reached a vent overlooking the office interior. Inside, Tarlin sat at his desk, his face illuminated by the glow of a datapad. His expression was tense, his fingers flying across the screen as he muttered to himself. Darren strained to listen, catching fragments of his words. "Transfer secured. Syndicate shipment. Fools won't suspect." His stomach dropped. Gesso had been right. Darren's eyes darted across the room, searching for proof. On the desk, a second datapad rested, its screen displaying a series of transactions. Tyvaran's script scrolled across it, but Darren caught enough symbols to recognize coded transfers. He felt his pulse quicken. That was the evidence. He just had to get it, but how? Crawling into the office meant exposing himself. He chewed his lip, weighing risks. Then, as if fate nudged him, Tarlin's comm buzzed. He cursed softly, grabbed the datapad, and left the office in a rush. The second datapad, the one Darren needed, remained behind, glowing faintly in the darkened room. This was his chance. He pushed the vent open carefully, dropping into the office with a thud softer than a whisper. His heart hammered as he crossed the room, his eyes flicking constantly to the doorway. He grabbed the datapad, tucking it into his jacket before hurrying back toward the vent. But as he reached for the opening, a voice cut through the silence. Well, what's a janitor doing in my office? Darren froze. His blood ran cold as he turned slowly. Tarlin stood in the doorway, his comm still in hand, his eyes narrowed with dangerous amusement. Behind him, the two Tyvaran guards stepped in, their batons humming with lethal energy. For a long moment, none of them moved. Darren's hand clenched around the datapad in his jacket, the only thing that stood between life and death. He forced himself to breathe, though fear clawed at his chest like a wild animal. "You don't belong here, Cole," Tarlin said smoothly, his tone mocking. "And you've just made the worst mistake of your short human life." Darren's mind raced, searching for any escape, any lie, any move that might buy him time. He realized with a sinking certainty that his test had only just begun, and it was about to get much harder. Darren's back pressed against the wall as Tarlin stepped closer, his smug smile twisting in the pale office light. The two Tyvaran guards fanned out behind him, their batons humming with a faint electric crackle. Darren tightened his grip on the datapad hidden in his jacket. It was proof, damning proof. But what good was it if he couldn't survive long enough to deliver it? Tarlin's voice dripped with venomous amusement. "I should have guessed you'd interfere again. Yesterday you got lucky. Today you're out of your depth. You think Lady Valith will protect a janitor when I tell her what you've done? No, she'll discard you like trash." Fear stabbed Darren, but he forced himself to swallow it down. He had seen bullies like Tarlin before, the kind who thrived on intimidation, who counted on fear to do half their work. "If you're so confident," Darren said, his voice shaky but audible, "then why are you afraid of what's on this datapad?" He tapped his jacket with a deliberate motion, letting the words hang. For the first time, Tarlin's smile faltered. A flicker of unease passed across his face, quickly buried under a sneer. "You don't even know what you're holding," he spat. "That's not proof. It's noise. Without me to explain it, it means nothing." But Darren had already seen the truth in that fleeting crack of expression. Tarlin feared the datapad more than he feared any words Darren could say. The guards advanced, their boots heavy against the floor. Darren's heart raced as he darted sideways, grabbing the corner of the desk and shoving it toward them. The impact knocked one guard off balance, his baton striking the desk with a sizzling hiss. Darren bolted for the vent, but the other guard lunged, grabbing his arm with crushing force. Pain flared, but Darren twisted, slamming the datapad against the guard's helmet in desperation. The screen cracked, sparks flying, but the datapad didn't shatter. The guard staggered back, stunned, and Darren dove for the vent opening. He scrambled inside, dragging himself through the tight shaft as shouts erupted behind him. A baton struck the vent wall, sending a jolt of electricity arcing dangerously close to his leg. He pushed himself faster, lungs burning, metal scraping his palms raw. Behind him, Tarlin's voice roared with fury. "Catch him! Don't let him out of here alive!" The guards clattered into the shaft after him, their armored bodies scraping against the narrow metal. Darren's only advantage was size. His smaller frame let him move faster through the cramped tunnel, though every muscle screamed in protest. He burst out of the vent onto a lower dock platform, gasping for air. The glow of ship engines illuminated the night, dock hands staring in confusion as Darren tumbled onto the ground. Without hesitation, he sprinted, weaving through crates and machinery as shouts echoed behind him. He knew he couldn't outrun Tyvaran guards forever. He needed a plan, fast. The datapad pulsed faintly in his jacket, as if reminding him of its weight. He had one goal: deliver it to Valith. She had demanded proof, and now he had it. If he failed, he wasn't the only one doomed. She would be trapped in webs spun by her enemies, and countless others would suffer. His survival wasn't just about him anymore. He ducked into a maintenance corridor, his breath ragged. The footsteps behind him grew louder, closing in like thunder. Panic clawed at his chest, but he forced himself to focus. Ahead, a cargo elevator blinked with a green light. He dove inside, slamming the button for the upper levels. The doors closed just as a guard's baton sparked against the frame, sending a shiver of heat across Darren's back. As the elevator climbed, Darren slumped against the wall, chest heaving. His entire body ached, but adrenaline kept him upright. He clutched the datapad tightly, praying it still functioned after the blow against the guard's helmet. The cracked screen glowed faintly, symbols still scrolling across it. It was intact. Relief surged, but it was fleeting. He still had to reach her. The elevator doors opened to the tower's service floor, and Darren slipped out, keeping to the shadows. Every step felt heavier, but determination pushed him forward. He moved like a ghost through corridors he had once cleaned nightly, now transformed into a battlefield of survival. He didn't know how much time he had before Tarlin's men caught up, but every heartbeat mattered. Finally, he reached the executive chamber doors. 2 guards stood there, their eyes narrowing as Darren stumbled forward. "I need to see Lady Valeth," he gasped. "Now, it's life or death." The guards exchanged a glance, hesitation flickering in their expressions. Darren yanked the datapad from his jacket, holding it up. "I have proof. Of betrayal. Let me through." The tension lasted only a moment before one guard opened the door with a hiss. Darren staggered inside, his legs nearly giving out as Lady Valeth rose from her chair. Her piercing eyes widened slightly at his disheveled state, her expression hardening as she saw the glowing datapad clutched in his hands. He collapsed to one knee, thrusting the device toward her. "Tarlin," he gasped, each word scraped raw from his lungs.
He's working with the Ziran Syndicate.
"I heard him. I saw the transfers. It's all here." His voice broke, desperation bleeding through. Valeth took the datapad with slender fingers, her eyes scanning the cracked screen. Her expression shifted from curiosity to cold fury as the evidence unfolded before her. She tapped the surface, symbols rearranging into patterns Darren couldn't read, but she clearly could. The silence stretched, heavy with consequence. Finally, she looked down at him. "You've done it," she said softly, though her voice carried the weight of thunder. "You've given me the blade I needed." She turned sharply, gesturing to the guards at the door. "Bring Tarlin to me, alive. The Syndicate will learn what it means to cross me." Relief crashed over Darren so hard he nearly collapsed fully. He had survived against all odds. But before he could breathe freely, Valeth knelt in front of him, her crystalline eyes locking onto his. "You risked everything for this," she said, her tone unreadable. "Why?" He met her gaze, exhaustion stripping away any pretense. "Because it was right. Because someone had to." Her expression softened, not into warmth, but into something sharper, respect edged with calculation. "Then you are no longer invisible," she whispered. "You are mine now, Darren Cole, and together we will remake this empire." The words sent a shiver through him, both terrifying and electrifying. He was still a janitor at heart, still the man who once pushed a mop through halls no one noticed. But now he had become something else, a player in a game of power where humans were never meant to stand. The guards dragged a struggling Tarlin into the chamber moments later, his protests ringing hollow as Valeth's fury bore down on him. Darren forced himself to his feet, watching the man who had nearly destroyed everything. There was no pity in him, only grim satisfaction. The predator had finally been unmasked. Valeth turned back to Darren, the datapad still glowing faintly in her hand. "This is only the beginning," she said. Her voice carried a promise both of danger and of possibility. "You have proven useful. Now we will see if you can be more than that." Darren's chest tightened, but he nodded slowly. He didn't know where this path would lead, only that he couldn't turn back now. His life of invisibility was gone forever. Whatever came next, he would face it head on. As the chamber doors sealed behind them, Darren realized that shouting "Don't sign" had been the first step into a world far larger and far deadlier than he could ever have imagined. He wasn't just a janitor anymore. He was the human who had forced an alien billionaire to listen, and the galaxy would never forget it.